For the first few centuries of Christianity, there wasn't really a single settled rulebook. Instead, you had this incredible group of thinkers we now call the Church Fathers. These were the ones who took a brand new faith and, on the anvil of history, hammered out its core beliefs. This is the story of patristics. So, let's imagine the scene. The original apostles, the men who actually walked with Jesus, they're gone. Their firsthand testimony has vanished with them. And all of a sudden, this young religion is facing a massive leadership vacuum. Who's in charge now? What are the correct beliefs? And how on earth do you keep this whole movement from just shattering into 1,000 different pieces? And the stakes? They could not have been higher. I mean, from the outside, you've got the Roman Empire looking at this new faith as some kind of dangerous, weird superstition. And then from the inside, you've got these charismatic teachers popping up with radical new ideas that threaten to just rewrite the entire story. This wasn't some academic debate, This was a fight for the very soul of Christianity itself. So in this explainer, we're going to follow these early thinkers as they tackle one crisis after another. We'll look at the first questions they had to answer, the letters they wrote from the front lines, how they defended their faith to Rome, and the internal battle for what to believe. And finally, we'll see how they built a whole new way of thinking and left a legacy that lasts to this day. Okay, so who were these people, really? And how do we even begin to study them? Well, it turns out their work created a whole field of study that gives us the answers. And that field is called patristics. The name comes from the Latin and Greek words for father. It's basically the science of diving into the lives, the writings, and most importantly, the thoughts of these early leaders. It's through this lens that we can piece together how Christian belief was first hammered out. The very first challenge they faced wasn't some big philosophical debate. No, it was way more practical. It came in the form of letters from communities that were in total crisis. Just think about it for a second. You've got a church in a city like Corinth that's just falling apart because of jealousy and division. You've got another one in Philadelphia being tempted by all these strange new teachings. Without the apostles around to say, hey, this is the way it is, who could possibly step in? This was real, on-the-ground chaos, and it needed an answer, fast. And that brings us to our first problem solvers, the Apostolic Fathers. These guys were either direct disciples of the apostles or knew them personally. And their solutions weren't these big, complicated books, they were urgent letters. You have St. Clement writing to Corinth to try and stop a split. You have St. Ignatius, literally on his way to be martyred, writing 7 letters just begging for unity. And St. Polycarp, who learned from the Apostle John, writes to preserve the faith as he was taught it. You can almost think of them as spiritual first responders. And this quote right here, wow, it just perfectly shows you their conviction. The elderly Polycarp is told by a Roman official to renounce Christ or die, and this was his answer. These weren't just guys writing letters. They were men with an absolute faith who were totally willing to die rather than betray what they believed. Okay, so after dealing with the chaos inside, the fathers had to turn and face a huge enemy on the outside, the Roman state itself. You see, to the average Roman, Christians were accused of everything. Cannibalism, atheism, because they wouldn't worship the emperor, you name it. So a new group of writers popped up called the Apologists, and they had like a 4-step mission. First, prove Christians aren't a threat. Second, expose how absurd and immoral the pagan myths were. Third, show that Christianity was actually a superior philosophy. And finally, and this is key, use the tools of Greek philosophy, Hellenism, to explain their faith without letting that philosophy corrupt it. A key figure here was a guy named Saint Justin Martyr. He was a professional philosopher who converted, and he actually kept wearing his philosopher's robe as a Christian, kind of like a badge of honor. He argued directly to the emperor that, hey, Christians are actually your best citizens, because our faith demands that we be good, moral people. That makes us totally harmless to you, and, in fact, a benefit to society. And the amazing thing is, these arguments, these letters, these defenses, they weren't lost to time. They were carefully saved and copied over and over, creating this incredible body of work that lets us see exactly how these big ideas were first argued. This collection is the absolute heart of what we now study as patristics. But the greatest threat didn't come from a Roman sword. No, it came from within. It came in the form of a powerful and really seductive alternative version of Christianity, a movement known as Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism was complicated, but the core idea was this: salvation isn't for everyone. It comes from a secret, special knowledge, or gnosis in Greek. Gnostics taught that the spiritual world was good and pure, but that our physical, material world was an evil prison created by some lesser evil god, not the true, supreme God. And the difference between these two views was just massive. On one side, you have the Orthodox faith saying, look, the one God who created this physical world is good, and salvation is a gift open to anybody. But on the other side, Gnosticism was claiming our world is an evil trap, and only a secret few can learn the code to escape. This was a battle over the nature of reality itself. So, how do you fight an idea based on secret knowledge? Well, the solution came from brilliant thinkers like St. Irenaeus. He basically said, you claim to have secrets? We have public proof. He pointed to two verifiable sources, the scriptures that were being read out loud in churches everywhere, and what he called apostolic tradition, that consistent teaching passed down in an unbroken chain from the apostles to the bishops. If a teaching wasn't in those two places, it wasn't the real deal. Simple as that.
All right. So with the faith defended from attacks outside and heresy inside, the next phase was all about construction. It was time to build a systematic way of actually thinking and talking about God.
And what happened was, two major intellectual centers popped up, and they had completely different styles. In Alexandria, you had thinkers like Origen, who were always looking for allegories, deeper, spiritual meanings hidden beneath the literal words of the Bible. But then in Antioch, you had guys like St. John Chrysostom, who were all about the historical and grammatical meaning. What did the text literally say? And this tension, this back and forth between the spiritual and the literal, would end up shaping Christian thought for centuries.
So, after all these centuries of struggle, debate, and brilliant construction, what did the Church Fathers actually leave us with? What did they build?
Well, their achievement was just monumental. They established church order, they defended the faith with serious intellectual firepower, they defined what it even meant to be orthodox. They literally invented the vocabulary we still use in theology today. They developed ways of reading the Bible that are still in use. And ultimately, they forged a faith that was so resilient, it didn't just survive the Roman Empire, it outlasted it.
And get this wasn't the work of just a few guys sitting in a room. The tradition of patristics includes over 200 prominent writers, thinkers, bishops, and martyrs. Their collective work formed the very bedrock of the faith. And really, here's the bottom line. Pretty much every major Christian idea, debate, and doctrine for the next 2,000 years would be built on the intellectual and spiritual foundation that these fathers laid down.
I mean, they wrestled with the biggest questions: the nature of God, the meaning of being human, the whole relationship between faith and reason. Their debates didn't just shape a religion, they helped shape the course of Western civilization. So the question for us, really, is how do the answers they forged in fire still continue to shape our world and maybe even our own beliefs today?